How do you make a game trailer in just 2 days? My friend Jonas Tyroler did just that using my tips, and this is going to be a guest video of his showing exactly how he did it, including his whole creative process and the decisions that he made along the way and what he did to help optimize his trailer for his Steam page. The video Jonas made is about 5 minutes long, and if you stick around to the end, you'll get to watch my critique of his finished trailer. By the way, if you're wondering, this isn't a sponsored post. He didn't pay me to feature this on his channel. If anything, Jonas will probably get fewer eyes on his video by featuring it on my channel, but he knows I don't put out videos very often on my channel, so he thought that this would be sort of a win-win scenario. I'm always happy whenever I hear and see game developers using my tutorials to help them make trailers for themselves, so this video made me really happy. Again, stick around and you'll see my critique of his finished trailer at the very end of this video.
Hey, I'm Jonas, and this is a case study on how to make a pretty good trailer for your indie game in just 2 days, using a bunch of advice from Derek Lu. I find starting with a blank canvas very difficult, so I followed Derek's advice to just block out the entire trailer using these text pop-ups here.
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement. Too easy. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of processing power available to me. Oh, this seems kind of chill.
But I actually took this idea one step further because I have screenshots of absolutely everything in my game. Basically the same thing, it's all just block out, but instead of having text there, I have screenshots there. And that kind of allows me to match the colors a little better. It gives me a better idea of what I have to record later on. Sometimes I zoom in on these screenshots a little.
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement. Too easy. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of processing power available to me. Oh, this seems kind of chill.
So now, before even recording any footage at all, I could already try out how it would look like on the Steam store page. And in order to do that, I basically just put a screenshot of the store page into a new sequence. And then I basically put the sequence on top of that. So the trailer sequence I just made with all of the screenshots. So now I can actually test out how the trailer will look like without having to export it, without having to upload it to Steam. And I can instantly watch how it will look like in context, which is extremely important, of course. Or whenever you're optimizing anything for any specific scenario, you always want to see how it looks like in context. So now I can already see what players will see when they come to my store page, and we're watching it without sound, because honestly, that's how most players watch your trailer on Steam anyway. In this phase, it's extremely easy to make changes. Just swap out a screenshot. And once I was happy with everything, I knew exactly which shots I had to record. And yeah, I recorded them.
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement. Too easy. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of processing power available to me. Oh, this seems kind of chill.
This is the version of the trailer we just watched, and now all that was left to do was polishing this, adding a couple of new sound effects. Sound is something I feel like really a lot of developers seem to miss out on. Polishing is mostly about adding sound effects. I added a ton of sound effects at the bottom here.
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement. Too easy. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of processing power available to me. Oh, this seems kind of chill.
Here you can see the unpolished version on the left and the new polished version on the right. As you can see, I added a bit of additional glow to a couple of objects. I just keyframed that in there, added a little glowy effect to the snail. I feel like it makes the action easier to follow, and actually I like it so much that I'll probably add this to the game as well. So for now, this is just an editing trick, but it really increases the readability, so I'll very likely add this to the game. And how did I figure out which additional post-processing effects were necessary for polishing? Obviously, once again, I tested that with my template right here. Whenever I make changes, I can basically see in real time how it will look like on the store page, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, to finish this video off, let's have a look at the full finished trailer. But before that, I want to say thank you again to Derek Lu for teaching me how to make trailers like this. That definitely sped up my learning curve quite a bit. So if you want to learn how to make better trailers, subscribe to Derek Lu. And if you kind of like the game you see here, then maybe you could also consider wishlisting my game Will You Snail on Steam. It's coming on March 9th, 2022. Thank you. Let's check out the trailer.
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement. Too easy. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of processing power available to me. Oh, this seems kind of chill.
Alright, I hope you enjoyed that look behind the scenes for how this trailer was made, and now I'm going to give my honest critique for how I think Jonas did. So overall, I think that structurally this trailer is very sound. My main critique is that I think he could have spent longer on a lot of these sections, especially this intro here where he's explaining how the game works. So here we have this intro where he says,
You try to dodge my traps. I try to predict your movement.
So we have this idea where the snail is dodging traps and the AI is doing something to predict their movement and then kill them. And then I guess that's something that you have to avoid while you're playing the game. So what this opening shot does a good job of explaining is the sort of genre that this exists in, the sort of Super Meat Boy style game where it's really difficult 2D platforming. But there seems to be some sort of hook where there's some sort of predictive thing going on. I don't know if that's just in story or if that's something that actually works in the game mechanics. So this opening shot works well, but the next shot, he moves on to this other scenario here where there's like lasers going, lasers firing, and then this shot says like, you don't have any idea how much like brain power that I have. I think that we could have used at least 1 or 2 more shots of some like basic platforming here that looked somewhat like this. So that before we moved on to this like sort of different style of traps here. So I'm going to assume that these lasers are also controlled by the AI, but I generally like to have an idea repeated, usually about 2 times, no more than 3 usually. And I think that there could have been maybe 1 more shot just to let this idea sink in about how this platforming works before moving on to this one with the lasers, and maybe show like 2 versions of the lasers or something like that. So I think like this intro, it's functioning as sort of a quick teaser, but I think that there's not enough intro in here to really get us familiar with how the game works. And then next up here, there's a section where it says like, oh, this part feels kind of chill. I like that this is here to show us some variety of the gameplay. So I guess this section here, it's not as like masochistic or sadistic part of the game where you don't have to worry about dying constantly, which I like that that's there for variety. But by the time this is shown up, I'm still trying to wonder a little bit about how the main game mechanic works. And then also even here, these shots are pretty quick and I don't actually know precisely what the objective is within each of these shots. When I'm watching this frame by frame and really slowly, what I'm seeing is maybe these are like triangle checkpoints that you have to sort of connect to each other. But again, this is while I'm watching it frame by frame, not while I'm just watching it the first time as a viewer. And in all likelihood, most people will not rewatch a trailer. And then over here, it looks like a similar idea. In fact, all these look like they might be a similar game mechanic because I see these triangle things in each level. I think that it would have been good to show this at a less completed state, or maybe start this one with like the first couple of nodes, and then the second one show, this puzzle sort of in the middle of being solved, and then have one get finished for the last one, sort of like 3 shots forming one idea of a puzzle being solved. But as it is, it's a little too much for me to absorb because, again, it just comes at me really fast and I only sort of really abstractly understand what is happening, and that's based off of what the voiceover is saying, that this area is kind of chill. And then after that, we have this part here, which is basically the climax. I think that this comes in, it's like it's coming in pretty early, especially because, again, the intro is incredibly short. The part with the puzzles is arguably the middle section is also pretty short, and then we're already at the climax. And then also we're seeing here still new game mechanics. So in here we see that the snail can shoot lasers, and then over here it looks like a basketball sort of game, which that sort of took me a while to register too, because I wasn't sure initially from the screen what was happening, because for all I know from the screen is that this square here is an enemy, and that's why it's moving. But I think if this shot came in earlier, then I might be able to see, oh, the snail actually hit the ball and into the basket. But I think it started a little bit too late in there for me to get oriented, because every shot when you first cut, we still need a little bit of time to see where we are, get situated, especially if we're getting a new idea shown to us. So this one, only really through repeat viewing did I fully understand, oh, it's a basketball and you're using it to open a door. And then over here we have some more of the AI antagonizing the snail, trying to kill them. So I understand that from before. And then we have this, what looks like a boss battle. And I do like this explosion here that transitions into this date. I think that's a great idea. I feel like I'm going to steal that at some point. I think it works really well with the energy. And then we have the title card, which this looks good. I think this is fine for a multi-platform standpoint. If you want to get really, really technical, a lot of this stuff would not pass for these particular platforms. So for example, Steam, you have to have only the Steam logo at the end. I mean, all the platforms, of course, you can only have their logos on the trailer, but there are also some other rules that they have for their particular branding guidelines. And one of them is that you really can't mess around and animate their logos. At best, maybe you can fade them on, but they don't want them to basically ever be seen in any form other than the just strict logo. So for example, here, you know, Nintendo Switch, they don't want to see it blurred up like this. They only want to see it like that. And even I've heard from friends that if there's like a white background or like snow falling behind the logo, and like at a certain moment that white crosses over the white of the logo and it makes it look a little bit different, rejected. So this would not pass if this was a Nintendo Switch logo, even if it was the only logo here. And I think the same goes for Xbox and PlayStation. Also, because for Xbox and PlayStation, they would want the PS5, PS4 logos, or whatever platform you're on. And same goes for Xbox Series X and S and Xbox One. And also with this chromatic aberration effect, I think they also wouldn't allow that. If you look at their branding guidelines, they really, really are very strict that you cannot animate their logos in basically any way. So that's just a little helpful tip there for anyone who is going to submit trailers to be featured in platform's digital storefront. Okay, and then also we have wishlist on Steam now, which that's a really good call to action, very simple and to the point. I usually recommend that you try to have that on the same page as your title card, just because it's a minor miracle people make it to the end of the trailer at all. So I think you should just front load the important information as much as possible. Don't expect people to make it very far. From YouTube retention graphs, we know that a very large percentage of people usually do not make it to the end or even close to the end. All right, so that is my critique of Jonas's trailer. I think really if he were to redo this, I would recommend something like taking this last third, you know, moving it over there to, you know, starting about like 30 seconds in or something like that, maybe a little bit sooner, and then just making this intro section just a little bit longer so we can just spend a little more time understanding the really basic gameplay before we really hit the climax and show all the really exciting stuff, because it seems to be that there's quite a bit of variety in this game within the overall structure. I think is good. I think people still understand the basics of it, if not the specifics. I do like to make trailers so that people have a little bit better of an idea of how the game plays. Some of this might be a little bit moot because Jonas has quite a following on his YouTube channel, which is really great for him, because having a following means that you're not trying to convince a completely cold audience if you have a community already who might be interested in your game, especially if they've been watching you develop it for many years. All right, so that was a little behind the scenes look and critique for the trailer for Will You Snail, which you can wishlist now on Steam. Thanks again to Jonas for giving me this guest post video. And if y'all liked this, please let me know in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know, and I'll see you around.